Welcome to another edition of Through My Lens. I'm your host, Karen Jackson, and Through My Lens Leadership Podcast is an opportunity for us to highlight, feature, and just sit down with folks and discuss some challenges, some setbacks, and how they have not let those define who they are and what they can accomplish. And we all know that this month is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And last year, we kicked off a special Sheroes Survivor series where we were able to highlight some of the latest research, some of the latest information pertaining to breast cancer prevention. And we also had an opportunity to sit down with some women who are not just surviving breast cancer, they are thriving. And so I am so excited today to have as my special guest, Dr. Karen Winston. And I love her name, as you can probably tell, that we are the Karens in the house today. So, Dr. Winston, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation.
Well, thank you for inviting me. The first thing I have to say is I'm not a doctor. My husband is Dr. Winston. I'm Karen Winston.
Okay,
I
okay.
have my graduate degrees, but I'm not a doctor.
Okay, okay. Well, I stand corrected. But thank you so much for coming on today and willing to share your story about your journey through breast cancer and what's on the horizon for you. So, we thank you so much for being a part of this special series.
Sure.
And the reason why I wanted to do this series is because some of the latest research says that at least 1 in 8 women will develop breast cancer in their lifetime. And so when you think about that, that's someone's mother, grandmother, daughter, sister, and maybe even sometimes men. I know that's something that we don't always think about, but with men as well. But when you think of 1 in 8, that's a little scary. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think that number is huge. And
Yes.
I'll start off by telling you that my mother had breast cancer. And, we have hereditary issues, and then we have issues that aren't hereditary at all.
Absolutely.
So you take your BRCA test, and they check to see if you are one that carries that gene in your hereditary material. So I have 2 daughters,
Okay.
and I went ahead and had the BRCA test before I ever knew I had breast cancer. And the
Wow.
BRCA test showed that I was not past the hereditary factors for the propensity to get breast cancer, even though my mom had breast cancer when I was 18. Now, she lived to be 91, so she was a breast cancer survivor.
Okay.
And I kind of used her as my role model through most of this.
Wow. So talk to me a little bit about, I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to mention that about the BRAC test.
Yes.
And I know there's, some apprehension about that. Was that something that you didn't think twice about as a result of the history of cancer in your family?
Well, I wanted the test. I
Okay.
wanted the test because I have daughters. And then I
Ah,
wanted to pass that information on to my daughters. But here's an interesting thing.
okay.
And that was maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago. My insurance wouldn't pay for that test to see.
Wow.
And I have wonderful STRS insurance. I have great insurance. However, they have a checklist that they check off. And if you have enough checks on your checklist, then you don't have to pay. Then your insurance will cover the test to see if you have this hereditary factor related to breast cancer, of which I did not. I didn't have enough checks in the boxes. And I thought the mere fact that my mother had breast cancer would check all the boxes, but it didn't. So it takes many factors into consideration, your age and, all of those things. So my
Wow.
insurance, I don't want to say I'm cheap, but my insurance didn't pay for it. So the first couple times I just said, oh, forget it. I'll just be careful. I'll make sure my daughters are, get tested every once in a while. But then my sister, for her birthday, got that DNA test done to get our DNA.
Okay.
And we are German, and we are Scottish and English. Our mother was German, and our father was Scottish and English.
Okay.
So, and that was our background. So Lynn got her DNA done, and she called me and she said, Karen, you're not going to believe this. And I said, what? And she said, we are Russian Ashkenazi Jew.
Wow.
So we, my sister said, oh, I always knew, I always felt that. I always thought that, as we spent lots of time with our mom's family.
Okay.
But my mother didn't know. My mother was purely German Lutheran. That's all she knew. So I said, okay. So oddly enough, the next time I went to get my checkup, with my doctor, I had my mammogram, and I had, all the checkups that we do on a yearly basis. Then I checked all the boxes.
Okay.
And don't you know, one of the boxes said Ashkenazi Jew.
Wow.
And so I checked it for the first time. Check. So then he went down through the list and he said, wait a minute, you checked Ashkenazi Jew. And I said, yeah, I just found out that my heritage from my mother is Ashkenazi, Russian Ashkenazi Jew. And he said, well, now you've got enough boxes. And I said, what? And he said, that was the last one. So by checking that box,
wow,
my insurance paid for the test. And
okay.
then we found out that I didn't have the hereditary factors.
Okay.
Even though I checked all the boxes.
Okay.
So those are the weird little things you learn along the way from an odd DNA test that my sister got from her birthday.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting? So I got the test, but I did not have the hereditary factor, which was a relief for my sister, for me, for my daughters. And then don't you know, I got breast cancer anyway. So that hereditary stuff isn't everything. It's important information to know. And if you can get that test, it's very important. Okay. But it doesn't tell the whole story, because I didn't have the hereditary factor. My mother had breast cancer and I had breast cancer. So it wasn't that.
Now, doesn't that change though for your daughters, because now their grandmother had breast cancer and now their
maternal
mom,
grandmother and their mother.
Right. So now that could make them at a higher risk.
Oh, yeah.
Also, right?
Yeah, it would. As a matter of fact, my oldest daughter just turned 40.
Okay.
So I asked her to get a baseline earlier than when you normally get your first mammogram. And she talked with her doctor, and at that point, she was in her 30s. He said, that's a little young, we're going to wait. And she did get her breast, mammogram done later, in her late 30s, I believe. And, and now she has a baseline. So your baseline is important, so they can keep going back and comparing it to your baseline. So I would say if your maternal grandmother and your mom had breast cancer, you need to get an early mammogram to get your baseline. Then every time you get your mammogram, they keep looking back and comparing it. Okay, looks the same, and everybody's are different. Some are very, mass filled, and some are not. But so now my oldest daughter is now on the, once a year you get your check.
Okay.
And that's what I've always done. And then that magical year, about 4.5 years ago, I got my mammogram, and then somebody came immediately and sat down and said, okay, now we've got some work to do. And that's when I found out that I did have breast cancer.
And talk to us a little bit about your diagnosis and some of your treatment that you had to go through as a result.
Okay, it's like stepping into a boat without oars, at least for me. And everybody has a different personality, and some people want start reading everything they can read about it and asking a million questions. And my sister's like that. I wish I was like that. But I'm more the type of person, the let it flow, just sit back and let it flow. So for me, it was like stepping in a boat without oars, and off I went down the river. So they start out by saying, okay, we only see one spot, and maybe we'll just do a lumpectomy, but then you get more tests, and then the results of more tests come back, and then no, this more detailed test, we find that you have multiple spots. So then the idea of you getting a lumpectomy kind of goes out the window, and now you're not looking at a lumpectomy anymore. Now you're looking at the mastectomy. You have choices. I mean, you just go from doctor to doctor, and you first one surgeon, talk to your surgeon, and they talk to you about what's going to happen. And because my mother had breast cancer, she had a mastectomy. I knew what it was going to look like, and my mother did not have the reconstruction surgery.
Okay.
She was, I don't know, we lived on a farm. She had things to do. She wanted to get going and get back to what she wanted to do. And she opted out of any of the reconstructive surgery. And I have to say, probably because of my mom, you talk to your surgeon and they tell you what they're going to do. And then the next thing you do is go on to the plastic surgeon who does all the reconstruction. And then they list how long it's going to take for your reconstruction and what it's going to look like when you're done. And then we all have our own decisions to make. There is nothing the same about any one of us, women and men who have breast cancer, because there are so many tiny little factors that influence the decisions that we make.
Correct.
And my mom was one of the factors for me of the decisions that I made. So I had already had my kids. My kids were all grown. I had grandkids. I was grandma. I've been married for 46 years. And
congratulations.
Thank you. And so I talked to the plastic surgeon. That was a wonderful man, highly informed, easy to talk to. They had all of the materials, so I knew exactly what would entail the reconstruction. But I finally, I talked to Eric and I talked to my sister. She's kind of my guide. Everybody has a life's guide. My sister is my life's guide. And the girls, and I said, I'm in my mid-60s. I have already retired. I was like 65. And I said, this is very nice and you've been very helpful, but I don't have time. I don't have time to stack onto my recovery what would involve in the reconstruction, the plastic surgery reconstruction. So I opted not to do any of that. And then, so I went back to my surgeon, and they have to know, because they do things a little differently if they know ahead of time that you're going to have reconstruction work done. And I went back to my surgeon, lovely, wonderful lady at Kettering Medical, the cancer center. And I said, I don't have time. I don't have time for this. I need to get healed and move on. I'm a grandma. I've got things I want to do and places I want to go. So I didn't. do that.
Okay.
And I had my surgery, went well. It was a single one breast mastectomy.
Okay.
And then they check your lymph nodes. And if they take just a few of your lymph nodes, and if there's nothing in your lymph nodes, then you're good to go. If they find cancer in your lymph nodes, that's a bigger picture, of which they did in my case. And then they go back, then they remove every lymph node they can find to
Oh,
keep
wow.
it from moving, it metastasizing.
Exercising.
Yep.
Okay.
So I did have all of my lymph nodes removed, and then I started my recovery. And after you've healed a certain amount, then immediately I went into chemotherapy.
Okay. And
Lost
so,
my hair.
okay. And talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, I know you talked a lot about the choices that you make when you're facing that kind of chemotherapy. A lot of times you don't have the choice to whether you'll keep your hair, you won't.
No. Oh,
It's just a
no.
part of that process.
Well, I suppose you could have the choice of, whether you take a pill or whether you get your chemo or whether you get your surgery. Us women, we can decide we don't want or we do want any of that. That's
Okay.
up to us.
Okay.
I was, give it to me. You got chemo? Give it to me. You got a pill when you're done? Give it to me. So I'm
Okay.
still taking pills for
Okay.
this up to 5 years. You take, and if he said, I'd like you to take another one for 5 more years, I'd say, give it to me.
Okay.
Because that's my decision. But another person that I love may not choose to do all. They may not have the give it to me mentality, but I do. I do because I do. I just want to go for it.
Okay.
So I've had friends in my life, Helen McCann, who I worked with for many, many years. And she would be done with one trial, and I'd say, what are you going to do now? And she'd say, I'm going to find another one, and I'm going to find another one. And so I had her as a model. I had my mom as a model. Okay, let's do this now. And whatever they said for exercise, you do. And my mother put every canned good, even her coffee that she got every day, on the highest shelf in our kitchen, because your range of motion is restricted. And so everything Mom used, she put on the highest shelf in the kitchen. And then she made herself reach to get the coffee down, because you got to get your coffee.
Absolutely.
So I remembered that that's what my mom did for range of motion. So I, put myself up high and made myself reach until I had my motion. But I was sick. Everybody who takes chemo is sick. I was sick.
Okay.
And I had lots of support. My sister had hair way down past her waist that she wore in a long braid. And when she first came to visit me, she walked into this restaurant and she had buzzed all her hair off. So I had, and I thought, so our hair grew out together. Now mine was never past my waist, but mine grew out and hers is growing out. She's got a ponytail now, but that was an amazing dramatic support.
Absolutely.
And she would come with me to chemo, and then the nurse would say, okay, I can't remember which of you is getting chemo, and I'd say, that would be me, right? And my neighbors would bring me food and say, does this taste good to you? No. Does this taste good to you? No. Does this? Yes. So I ate many, many peanut butter balls that my friend Tim made
Mhm.
because they were nutritious and they had dried milk and peanut butter. So I ate a lot of those few things that tasted good to me. I had a dog on my lap a lot of the time, you know, visitors, and a really great comfortable chair. I called it my chemo chair. And every time I'd flop it out, the dog would hear me pull the chair out and she would come running and jump up on my lap. So she always knew it was time for me to get in my chemo chair and get comfortable.
Okay.
And it felt good to be done with my chemo. It's a wonderful day when your chemo is done. I mean,
Mhm.
it's a woohoo day
Okay.
when your chemo is done. And I
Eh,
went to soccer games, and my grandson's soccer team had head wraps made with soccer balls, and I
Oh.
wore those to soccer games. So I
Oh,
I still taking one pill. I've got 6 more months to take
okay.
one pill. And then, as far as I know, my medication will be done. And it's supposed to mark some golden day that you've reached the 5th year. But I belong to a really important support group.
Okay.
And I have learned that you can't, I have to stay humble
Mm.
because I see that the 5 years is important, but it isn't true for everybody. I guess what I'm trying to say is I have to stay humble and I can't be cocky. I want to be cocky and say 6 more months, but I can't be cocky because I know for a fact that we all have our times, we all have our lifespans.
Mhm.
And I always say to anybody who says, I'm a survivor, and I'll wear my t-shirt because I'm a survivor. But the truth is you're a survivor till you're not.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Mhm. Absolutely.
You're a
Absolutely.
survivor till you're not. So I am a survivor. But I'm also smart enough to know that I will be a survivor until I'm not. And that's what I have to say about that.
Absolutely. And that's so important because I think that's, we never want to hear the C word, first of all.
Right?
But like you said, we all know that on this journey, we don't know what we have to
No,
face.
no, you
And
don't. You don't
and
get to know.
you don't get to know. And so, I think what you said was so true. It's like, I'm a survivor. You talked about how much you are thriving, how much you're like, okay, let's do this heads on, whatever I need to take, whatever I need to do to keep myself well, to keep myself here for my
Yes.
grandchildren,
Oh,
my
yes.
family.
Right.
Um,
Right.
I'm willing to do it, but not lose sight of that this is a journey,
Right.
it is a journey. And we're believing in God that you're gonna get to that 5 year and you're gonna be saying that woohoo.
Yeah, yeah. I
You
do
know?
a cartwheel, but the last one I did, I got a bloody nose. So my
Yeah.
husband said, Karen, you can't do those anymore. I said, got it. So
That's
no more
right.
cartwheels.
Well, we'll have to
But if
come
I
up with
could, I
another.
would.
That's right. But we'll come up with another equally fascinating way to celebrate that
Right,
5
right.
years,
Maybe
right?
I can just jump. If you can get your
There
feet
you
2 inches off
go.
the floor, it qualifies as a jump.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's a couple things I wanted to just hit on because I think they're so important. One of the things you talked about was
Yeah.
the support of your
Yes.
family,
Yes. Oh, yes.
your neighbors and things like
Yes.
that because
And
you
my
hear,
daughters.
yeah, and your dog.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
let's
Yeah.
not
And my dog. Yeah. My dog.
absolutely. So, what would you say to a woman or man who has gotten their diagnosis and so they know that they may have to do chemotherapy and what other kind of treatment out there
Right.
to get well? What would you say? What are some key things, advice would you give them for the support?
Oh, I would say keep your door open. Do not be secretive, because you would be so surprised at the people who show up and give you support, and you may not even expect that particular person. Not to mention the fact that when you're walking around with no hair, all the people that step up to you and say, hey, I look just like you 2 years ago, but my hair came back. And I find myself doing that. You're waiting for a seat at Bob Evans and there's somebody right beside you who has no hair. And now I want to say, I look just like you 4 years ago. My hair came back. And then you start checking and chatting, and actually you belong to a club, and you may not choose it, but you belong to a club, and it gives you a connection. Now, I belong to a group called Livestrong, sponsored by the Dayton YMCA organization, and it's for cancer survivors. I belong to the Xenia Y branch.
Okay.
They get funding in Livestrong to train the trainer. And our trainer's name was Alicia. Okay. And here in Xenia. And so I don't even know how the word spread, but we had maybe 9 or 10 members, men and women, with a variety of types of cancer, but a number of us women had breast cancer at all different stages. Some who had it years ago, and she's 80. Some who has a granddaughter who's a teenager, and she just went through her own chemotherapy, and her grandmother is a part of our group because she's a breast cancer survivor. So we get together at the Y and spend about the first 15, 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes just talking and laughing and teasing, and you really build a wonderful bond. And then she makes you go into the training area where you have to get on the machines and walk, and she assesses where you are. And then she said, Karen, you can step it up here on this treadmill. You're lagging behind. Then somebody in your group goes, yeah, Karen, step it up. So it's physical as well as mental, and we stay physically fit, and we have a wonderful support group, and it's called Livestrong, and it's through the YMCA.
Okay.
That is an important group. During COVID, we couldn't meet and we missed each other, so we started meeting in the park.
Okay.
And now I think we might have a new trainer when we do get back, because the trainers don't stay forever. It's hard. It's emotionally hard with our group, because some of us die, and so they lose their group members.
Wow. And I know that has to be difficult for the whole support group.
Yes. Well, it's incredibly difficult. And and we have sent one of our group members off to college, and I will tell you a cute story. We had laundry baskets and laundry soap, and he had leukemia, and but he was in remission, and we gave him rolls of quarters to go off for his freshman year in college. And we're supporting now. You remember, most of us are gray hairs, and 80, 60, 70s, and and a few 50s. And then we have this young kid who is going away to college, and we were all excited, and we said, okay, you're all ready. And we were giving him, retired professor, I'm giving him help at school and doing his assignments. And then one of the guys said, well, we never asked you, what's your major? And he said, my major is cannabis. And all of us gray haired, and we all went, huh?
Huh?
What? Did you say cannabis? Your major's cannabis? And he said, oh, yes, the marketing, the growing. And we all looked at each other and said, there's a cannabis major? Man, we are old. But we were supportive and excited for him. And then we had really invested in this cannabis major.
All
You know,
right.
that was part of our support group.
Right.
So it's varied in ages, varied in types of cancer. We've learned a lot. We have guest speakers come in. Uh, it's a good group, and
Okay.
we've been meeting now for years.
And I think that's a great story to share because, there's a lot of the folks that's in that arena now that are helping cancer patients as a result of some of
Yes,
those.
yes, yes. And I will tell you, after we realized that he was a cannabis major, then then our trainer said, well, would you like me to have somebody come in and talk to you about the benefits of
Mhm.
cannabis for cancer survivors? And we said, sure. So we had somebody come in and talk to us about that. It was, it was interesting, very interesting.
I believe it. I believe it. You and that was one thing I was gonna mention to you too, when you talked about eating. I heard you mention about the eating and making sure that you were
Right,
eating things.
right,
What advice would you give? Because I've heard a lot of cancer patients, chemotherapy who's taking chemotherapy,
right.
talk about how they lose their appetite. And that's so important that we still have that nutritional intake that we need.
Well, you have to. And once again, it's the oddest thing, but it's different for all of us. So you try different things, and I will tell you that mine was sweet and cold. If it
Mhm.
was sweet and cold, I did real well. And but then I know others who wanted warm and salty and hot and spicy. So your taste at that time during chemotherapy is as varied, as every one of us are varied. But mine was cold and sweet. So then we had to find cold, sweet things that were also nutritional. And, because you want to go for a hot fudge sundae, and that's, not necessarily the route you should head down. So that's where we found these peanut butter balls that my neighbor made that involved uh, dried milk,
Mhm.
and lots of peanut butter, and rolled in cereal, and they were cold, but they
Mm.
really were like a little nutrition ball.
Okay.
I can't even say how many times I ate that, and I ate a lot of cereal with cold milk
Okay.
and a little sugar. I
Okay.
don't know about those people who can eat Cheerios without sugar, but I'm not one of them.
Okay.
Yeah. So those are the things that cold peaches. My sister canned
Mm.
peaches,
Okay.
pickled beets, and they were cold. See,
Ooh.
now all of those things tasted wonderful to me, but the person sitting beside me in my Livestrong group would say, "Oh, warm pretzels, mashed potatoes," and they had a totally different taste system.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's so varied, but what
Okay.
you've got to find is what works for you,
Okay.
and then find what's nutritional that works for you, and not necessarily the hot fudge sundae. And then you better go down the peanut butter and, peaches route. At
Absolutely.
least that's my suggestion, but I'm not a nutritionist, not by any, but
Right.
there are cold things that are nutritional that taste good to you. And it's usually the first couple days after chemo. Maybe not the first day after. First day after chemo, usually you feel like Wonder Woman. And
Mhm.
then the second day, you begin to, third and fourth day, then you
Okay.
don't want to eat, you don't feel well. But then you start getting
Back your energy.
back your
Okay.
energy and your taste. And
Mhm.
then you got to go back to the cancer center and get another infusion, and then it starts all over again for how, I don't know how long everybody's chemo
It's
schedule is
different.
different, 6 months for me or 8 months for you. It's just so different. Everybody's story is so different.
And so, this has been a great conversation. I can't believe
Thanks.
that we're out of time. But I do want to ask you, I have two questions, and I'll let you have the final word. I want to ask you, like you said, you talked about this experience and journey being different for everyone.
Everybody.
So I would like you to talk about what advice would you give someone who is just embarking on this journey? What one piece of advice would you give them?
I would say, um, I would say, talk to your support people and talk to them a lot. I needed to talk and talk and talk, and I picked my sister, my daughters, the ones that my bestie friend, the ones that I could talk to, and they would just sit and listen, um, and say, "Go for it." And then personally, I'm I'm going to put every can above my head as possible to keep pushing myself. I wanted somebody there who said, "Let me help you put the cans on the top shelf," and not somebody who said, "Oh no, don't let me get the can for you, Karen." No,
Okay.
I
Okay.
needed somebody who would support me and say, "Let's go. I'm with you.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'll put the cans up there for you," instead of "I'll get them down for you."
Yeah. That's great. That is.
Plus, plus you've got things to do. Doesn't matter how old you are, you've got things to do. And of all the pieces of information I wanted to keep in my head is I've got things to do. I've got grandkids who are going to graduate. I've got grandkids who haven't even gone to kindergarten yet. I've got things to do. Uh, so I'm going to do everything I can. Uh,
Mhm.
and then I have a little note on my cell phone. Every time I open my cell phone, this note is at the bottom of my cell phone, and it says, "Be kind to yourself."
Mhm. That's awesome.
And as a grandma and a mother, it's hard to do that because you always want to, "Oh, here, you can have my money or you can have my food." You want to give them everything, you want to take care of them. And then you're sitting on the edge of the bed, totally whipped because you forgot to be kind to yourself. So it's okay to say, I got to sleep now. I got to sit down now. I got to go outside and breathe now. Even though you're in the middle of cooking somebody's dinner who's really hungry, got to go. Be kind to yourself. I'm still working on that one. I find that one hard.
Mhm.
Maybe one of the hardest things for me is being kind to myself and
Mm.
saying, "I'm a mom, I'm a grandma, I'm a wife, but I
Yes.
get to be kind to myself." That
Yes.
means walking out the back door and sitting under a tree. I'm going to walk out and sit under the tree. But I wasn't always like that. That took me a minute to figure out. Be kind to yourself.
That's awesome. And I think that's something that we all can do regardless of what you're facing in life because, we are often the ones that are the hardest on ourselves.
Yes, we are.
Um, it's like, toughen up, you can do this. But
Yes.
being kind to yourself to just say, okay, today is just not one of my best days.
Do you think
Tomorrow may be
do you
different.
think it's harder for women to be kinder to themselves than men?
I do. I do.
Just
Yes, yes,
saying. Just
yes.
saying.
And I think too is because, like you said, we're always giving of ourselves to family, to children, to,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
and so
Yes.
oftentimes we put ourselves at the bottom of that
We
list.
do. We
And
do.
but I think, when we have to face various health issues.
Yeah, this breast cancer business is no time to put yourself at the bottom and drag yourself out of your comfortable chair to make somebody mashed potatoes. No.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think that is so good because, um, you know, no matter what you're facing, you have to learn to, encourage yourself. That song that talks about sometimes you just got to encourage yourself.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to love on yourself. And to me,
I
that's
call
what
it head talk, Karen. I have head
okay.
talk.
Okay. Okay.
I have conversation, I don't say it out loud because then, the dog looks at me funny, but
Yes.
I have head talk and I just say, okay, what are you going to do today that you really want to do? What do
Absolutely.
you want to do today?
Absolutely.
And then I
Absolutely.
let myself do that.
Yes,
Mhm,
yes. And I think when you're faced with, cancer, it's like, okay, everything becomes surreal. It's like, okay, well, you become intentional. It sounded like to me, you became more intentional about how you spent your time and what you did with your
yes.
time.
And my own decisions.
Yes, that was important.
When you step in the boat and it starts floating down the river, but there are times when it falls, it comes to time to make some decisions, and
Absolutely.
you make the decisions, not any, not somebody who's telling you, oh, you should get that surgery or you should get this, you'll be so happy. No, you get in the boat, you let it start floating down the river, but you make the decisions that affect you.
Mm,
You.
wow. Well, I think that is a great way to end this conversation.
Okay.
I certainly, certainly appreciate you taking your time out to
Sure.
share your story, to encourage other women that may be facing this journey or this is the time now. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So
Oh
we
yeah.
urge you to get your mammogram, get it early if you need to.
Yes.
Because I
Yes.
think
Get your
that is
baseline.
absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. And I'll be getting mine real soon, my
Okay.
annual exam. So
Mine's in January.
I stay on it because I have a history. My mom, my aunt, her sister passed, which is why this is so dear to my heart. And as a matter of fact, when I went through my last exam, they mentioned to me about this BRAC test
Yes.
and that I was because I am considered high risk because of that.
Well, see
Um,
if you can check all the boxes and your insurance will pay for it.
yes, yes, yes.
And
So
there are
actually,
groups of people who are more likely to get it, which is why I got to check that last box.
well, I think I am eligible from what they said to me.
Good.
So I
Good.
am, but I just have to wait till I go back for my annual, and then I'll make some decisions on that. So that was great. We hadn't even planned to talk about that, but I appreciate that, and I think that's important for us to have these kind of conversations because,
Oh,
like you
sure.
said,
Sure it is.
not be secret. Talk to people because information is power, knowledge
It
is
is.
power, and
Yeah.
then that allows us to do the what you just said is to make the decisions that are best for you
Right.
and not
And
what other people say.
not what other people, not what I say I did, you know.
Yes. Yes. Well, I am so excited, and we're going to have to come back. We're going to plan part two of this conversation. We'll make it after uh, the 5 years, so we'll already have our
Yeah.
celebration
Yeah.
plans. Okay,
Yes. Yes.
sounds great. And in the meantime, you continue to still keep fighting. You still keep loving and keep spreading the wonderful message that you have
Yes. And
shared with
keep
us
going
today.
to my support group.
Absolutely, absolutely, all
That's
of that
important.
stuff.
That's really important.
Well, thank you so much, and I
Yeah.
look forward to our next conversation. And have a wonderful time with your grandkids. And
Yep.
I look forward to hearing all your wonderful stories.
Okay. All right.
Okay,
Thanks, Karen.
thank you so much,
Uh-huh.
and thank you for being a part of Through My Lens. This is a special series, Shero Survivor Series, women who are not just surviving but thriving
Yes.
as a result of breast cancer. So thank you
Yes.
so much. God bless. If you want to know any more information, please follow me on my um, Facebook page, which is Powered for Purpose, or you could always reach me at my website, www.embrace-your-power. Until next time, I'm Karen Jackson, your host of Through My Lens. Have a great day.
Bye, Karen.
Bye bye.